Okay, so I guess we can start off with a simple question. How are you?
I'm doing as well as can be given the state of the world and everything going on.
Yeah, the
I'm
last
alive.
couple,
As somebody said recently, if you're still fogging up the mirror, you're doing okay. So
more or
sometimes
less, physically anyways.
yeah.
The last 4 years have definitely been interesting. We've went through a pandemic.
That interesting is a way of putting it. Yeah, yeah. I think I've had enough interesting for now. Yeah, I'd really like a little bit of boring and stable. That'd be nice. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, at least two wars. Roe v. Wade,
Mhm.
Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Trump voter fraud claims. Yeah, a lot of things happened.
Plenty of COVID.
So, out of curiosity, you're mostly just known for pro-life humanists. Is that an actual organization or is it only like more of an online presence?
It is an actual organization. I started it back in 2012. Sorry, it was 2012 is when I got the idea. 2013 is when it became official. And unfortunately, the website right now has completely kind of gone to crap. I had to like renew my DNS, my whole hosting thing, and they did something that blew up the site. So if you do go and check it out right now, the link is prolifehumanists with an s.org. You're not going to see a whole lot because all the links are broken. However, if you go to the Wayback Machine, you can find everything there. So pro-life, PROLIFE, humanists, HUMANISTS.org. And yeah, it's not the biggest organization, but we have members in Canada and in the States, and we've got an online presence as well as a YouTube channel, and hopefully there'll be more content in the future.
Because I do remember checking out the website when I first heard about it. It didn't look like it was too active recently. And usually when I check out organization websites, I want
Yeah.
to see a bit of a news section or at least opinion section.
Mhm.
Uh,
I'd love to see that too. And unfortunately, the past 4 years have taken quite a lot out of me. I've been dealing with the pandemic, and it's just been a real challenge. I'm one of the people whose life has been kind of sidelined because society basically turned its back on immunocompromised people, on disabled people, vulnerable people, and anybody who needs to avoid long COVID and adding more disabling health issues to their life is basically having to choose to stay home all the time or have to be like ultra careful wearing the really tight fitted masks. It's a real risk. So I've been just really devastated and disappointed by the way society in general, as well as the pro-life movement, has treated disabled people in the past 4 years. And that's sort of taken a lot of my emotional energy has gone into that, as well as dealing with health issues. And yeah, also I was a student for a few years, so I was taking ethics and political philosophy at the University of Ottawa, and we'll hopefully get back to that at some point as well.
oh, okay. Yeah, I never really studied philosophy. I did take one philosophy class. I did get into existentialism and political philosophy a little bit when I was a teenager, though, but I'm not much of a expert on that.
It's
I
a
do
lot of
work
fun. Yeah.
I do work
Sorry,
with
guys.
AFL, and a lot of people are. This one guy, John, has a YouTube channel called Rune of the Gods. Total philosophy expert. It was kind of annoying me when I spoke to him at Freedom Fest this year because he seemed to know a lot, and I had no idea what he was talking about. I was so jealous.
Yeah, it's a fun topic in general. I think like for me, I used to be religious. I used to be Christian many, many moons ago, and I enjoyed theology. I enjoyed like the big deep questions and going back and forth on free will versus election. Does God control all our choices, or that kind of stuff was a lot of fun to me. And so when I left Christianity, philosophy was kind of the next stop in that road, because it's kind of the same idea where you have to now explore the definitions of life and what is true, what is real, but not based on religion, yeah, based on ideas and science and other things that are not no longer religion. And philosophy to me is just a whole lot of fun, and ethics specifically.
Yeah, I agree, but I may have gone into the wrong philosophers. I
That's
loved Plato when I was a teenager. I loved his idea of the philosopher king. I mostly was influenced by Friedrich Nietzsche. Ayn
fine.
Rand was my introduction to political philosophy, but
Oh Lord. Okay.
I did
Yeah.
deviate from objective. I was never an objectivist, but I did get more critical of it over the years, especially after I read Nathaniel Brandon's book, Judgment Day. I'm
Right.
not sure if you've read that, but
Uh, sorry, it was called what?
Judgment Day by Nathaniel Brandon. It was a memoir of his
Mm.
years with Ayn Rand. I do recommend it because it was very interesting, but it not gonna lie, she pissed me off.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of books on my reading list. So once you start going just beyond the classics, there's a lot of really fun, continental philosophy, and you can go to like Asian philosophy and Indian philosophy, and like the list just keeps growing. So it's it could take you quite a while to get through all the different writers out there who they all have interesting things to say, and some of them are going to agree with, and some of them they won't. But generally speaking, I like to be challenged, which is part of why I enjoy philosophy, because it kind of gives me something to, you know, if an idea is uncomfortable, that's a good feeling, because I don't want to get complacent where it's like I know everything there is to know, and this is the facts, and this is the truth. Like I could be wrong. I've been wrong on things before. I used to really believe in religion. I was a devout Christian. There's a lot of things that I used to believe that I no longer do. So generally speaking, yeah, if philosophy has something to challenge me or make me think, that's always a good thing.
Yeah, I definitely been around people who get overly aggressive when their beliefs have been challenged. I have this one anecdote. It was this girl in my psychology class. We were just four of us were just talking together, and they were talking about politics stuff, specific stuff I didn't particularly agree with, but decided to keep my mouth shut. But I ended up saying something that she apparently didn't believe. I said to her that a lot of conservatives also self-identify as libertarian. I didn't think that was an offensive thing to say. It just seemed like a simple fact. And for some reason, she didn't believe me,
Mm,
and she started raising her voice and yelling at me for saying that. And I started yelling back. And
yeah, that's it's unfortunate, and needless to say, given that I'm involved in the topic of abortion, I have seen people get very heated, and it's sad that people's identity is kind of so intertwined with what they believe that they can't separate themselves from their views, to the point where I've seen like friendships ended, people get blocked. You basically nowadays you just disagree with one thing with a really close friend, and suddenly they're like, "Oh, you're evil. Don't want to know you. Don't want to talk to you." And yeah, I've been the subject of many people yelling in my face, and I think generally it's important to try to see the human in the other person you're talking to. Knowing that I've been wrong about things in the past, knowing that this person in front of me is a human being, we're all kind of on this journey to try to figure out, what's true and what's real out there. There is no, especially if you're an atheist, there's no book that we're all relying on to come to the facts, the truth. And even people who come from a religious perspective, I don't need to tell you, like there's the Bible constantly is a source of disagreement for Christians. That's why there's like what 39,000 different denominations. So yeah, it's important to remember that smart people disagree with us. Smart people agree with us. People are not necessarily evil or stupid or have bad intentions just because they disagree with us. And if we're able to talk to one another with a spirit of charity, then hopefully we can all make progress and grow from the conversation.
yeah, I agree. Abortion is definitely a touchy subject. From my experience, if you are speaking to pro-lifers and you say something that agrees with the pro-choice argument, they're gonna come to the assumption that you just think it's okay for women to kill babies. But sometimes if you say something that's like remotely pro-life to pro-choicers, they somehow get under the impression that I think it's okay to control women, but I don't think most people on both sides have those opinions. You
That's
know,
right.
a
Yeah.
lot.
I don't think anybody is a true villain who just like, I want to control you, hoo hoo. And like likewise, I really don't think that most people are, pro-choice because they hate babies. In fact, many pro-choice people have babies. It's not, no, like we need to be charitable to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I do think people on the religious right have been really hurting the pro-life movement.
Mhm.
I do have one friend. He's a nice guy, but he's a little too far on the right. Bit of a Nick Fuentes fan, Andrew Tate fan kind of guy. I remember when news of Roe v. Wade was getting overturned was coming out. He was posting some pro-life stuff, and he said that it has nothing to do with his religious beliefs. It's just
Mhm.
that life begins conception. It's about protecting kids, and then Roe v. Wade got overturned. And first thing he posted was, "Yes, the win goes to the children and to God." Prayer emoji, prayer emoji, and I thought, yeah, that's not helping.
No, no, it's not. Yeah, I have actually been disappointed with where the pro-life movement has gone since the overturn of Roe v. Wade. In fact, when I saw that it was happening, my first thought was, we're not ready. Like as a movement, we're not ready. We're not ready to really be what this movement needs to be to really take care of the people who are facing unplanned pregnancies. And that's one of my biggest heartbreaks and one of the things that I've been truly passionate about as a pro-life humanist is, I don't want to just end abortion, take abortion away, remove choices. Like I actually want to provide more choices. Like I want there to be options that currently don't exist. And we live in a society where women don't have the options to have children if they live in poverty. We live in a society where you don't have the option to have children if you are going to school. I mean, you can, but it's very, very difficult. We don't have a society that supports people in so many circumstances having children, and that leads to the need for abortion. That there are circumstances out there that are really challenging, they're really, really hard challenges. And every time I've read, books about people who've chosen abortion, it always comes down to like there are circumstances that often have nothing to do with the pregnancy itself. It's like it's the circumstances that lead to, how can I afford to raise a child? I don't have the support of a partner. I don't have the support of parents. I don't have the money. I'm trying to go to school. My employer won't give me the time off. I only have a few days of sick leave. There's no guaranteed parental leave. There's no state funded daycare. And we never did get to that point as a society of fixing all those holes. And then they overturned Roe v. Wade, and I was like, no, we're not ready. Like as much as I want to see abortion ended, I don't want to see people get wounded and have their lives upended in the process of doing that. That's not the way to do it. Like we need to be doing it in a way that's going to also benefit and fill in those gaps. Um, many years ago, I read a book by Frederica Matthews Green called Real Choices, in which she went through all the reasons why women choose to have abortions. And the vast majority of the time, and in fact, this is backed up by like Alan Gutmark Institute, the vast majority of abortions are for socioeconomical reasons. And she said in her book, like, that women don't choose to have, or women don't want an abortion like they want an ice cream cone or a Porsche. They want an ice cream cone like an animal caught in a trap wants to gnaw off its own leg. Essentially saying that, there is a trap, there is circumstances, there are very difficult circumstances. And we as a society, instead of saying like, hey, let's open the trap, let's get rid of the trap, let's fix this, all we've done is come along and say, let's give women a sterile, safe, legal knife to chop their leg off. And that ultimately doesn't actually help the situation. It doesn't fix what causes abortions to be needed in the first place. It just leaves those problems there for the next woman and the woman after her and the woman after that. So to get back to what you were saying, yeah, I think the pro-life movement has a long way to go towards really making abortion unthinkable and unnecessary, but also the pro-choice movement. If you're pro-choice and you then need to be saying, like, what about all these women who don't have the choice, whose only choice then becomes abortion because finances, because lack of support, because these options aren't there. What about their choice? If they want to choose to have their child, can they in this society? This is something that both pro-life and pro-choice people should be coming together for, to make pro better, a middle ground, if there is.
I do remember after
Sorry,
Roe v.
I talked quite a lot there.
No, it's okay. I was just thinking back to when Roe v. Wade got overturned, and a lot of my conservative friends were celebrating it. Some were posting these articles about, I think it was Texas, how their the numbers of abortions actually decreased, but that was actually out of context, because if you look at nearby states that still had abortions legalized, the number of abortions happening there skyrocketed, and a large majority of those license plates came from Texas. So
Right.
it wasn't really the win they were trying to make it out to be. And I thought that was I thought that was like pretty, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say in bad faith,
Mm.
because
Yeah,
it's
it's
trying to get like this false narrative that it had succeeded when it clearly didn't.
yeah. I mean, there is some evidence that abortion laws do decrease abortion to a point. We saw that at the start of, like, when Texas was first making abortion illegal, or like messing with the laws, like even as much as a decade ago when it started to become harder. There was a lot of people who suddenly went, oh my gosh, I got to get myself on birth control. A lot of people signed up to get sterilization. A lot of people got IUDs implanted. So there is, to a certain degree, like a large percentage of people who made different sexual choices once they thought, oh, I won't be able to access abortion quite so easily. So there is something to be said for, yeah, the laws do make those differences, and do have an impact on the ultimate number of abortions. However, I still come back to the fact that we can do better than that. Sure, you can make it illegal and you can force people to stay pregnant, and that's not really ultimately what's going to address the reasons why abortion exists in the first place. And of course, yeah, having people do, like, abortion tourism, that's not going to really solve things either, because a dead fetus is dead no matter what state or country they're going to be killed in. So I'd much rather see, first of all, like I said, the emphasis on social programs, on ending poverty, on making parental options available, and, oh yeah, also contraception, and funding contraception, and funding better studies towards better contraception as well. For instance, male birth control. I can tell you, I think it was 2005 when I first learned about male birth control. I think it was called Arsterg, or it was the Vasogel. That's just one out of many, and there's also many more that are currently being tested. And, like, that was almost 20 years ago, and we still don't have that on the market. It's still being, like, tested. There's not a whole lot of funding, unfortunately, going to make that a big priority. Like, we got the COVID vaccine in, like, what, like 8 months, to like under a year, I think, when the first vaccine started rolling out. So we know that they can fast track medications. We know that they can do it. And if we were really, like, and this goes for pro-life and pro-choice people, like, if you really wanted to address this and give people the options to prevent pregnancies, then get behind male birth control. I mean, that's such an easy win, that, like, it doesn't cause anyone to die. There's no abortion. It just, and it's, the ones that I've seen are actually quite safe and effective too. And they've been 100% in some of these studies. So yeah, just, yeah, get birth control out there for crying out loud.
Yeah, I do think that's more important than actually trying to get rid of abortions by making like these pro-life laws. A lot of people have been arguing that an increase in education and responsibility will actually help naturally decrease pregnancies, and I agree with that. I think that's extremely important. Do you remember when during the pandemic with the masks and when eventually the vaccines came out, a lot of people kept coming back to the abortion, my body, my choice argument.
Ah, yes. So that's, yeah, this is one area that hits very close to home. I have been extremely disappointed and heartbroken by what I've seen from a lot of my pro-life friends for the past 4 years. Because we were so close. We were so close to being able to show people what we've been talking about all along, which is that there are limits to bodily autonomy, and that it is okay to step in and protect vulnerable lives when there's something that can end a life, and that is, in order to protect vulnerable people, that there is the option for the state to step in and say, no, there's a limit to what you can choose, there's a limit to what you can do with your own body. I mean, we have that already, that concept exists in society. Like, you can choose to drink, but you can't choose to drink and drive. Like, we understand that there's a limit to your bodily rights and what you can do with your body. And we were so close. Like, that was just a perfect illustration. And then pro-lifers, mostly Republicans, sadly, flipped the narrative and started walking around with my body, my choice in order to oppose mask mandates. Like, guys, come on. And like, it blows my mind, really, because the pro-life movement prides itself on being a movement that values vulnerable lives, that is, like, pro-life. It's built right in the name. And in fact, like, one of the books that I read years ago was called The Third Time Around. I don't remember who the author was, but they talked about how the pro-life movement is essentially built on the early Christians who had rescued disabled children and children who'd been left to the elements and abandoned outside the cities. And these early Christians apparently rescued and adopted these children. And that's kind of what the pro-life movement is doing today, stepping in and defending vulnerable people. And somehow we've sort of missed that mark when it comes to disabled people in the pandemic, where all of a sudden, vulnerable lives, it's like, oh, my body, my choice, and screw you. Like, how does this happen? Like, Pearl Buck, I believe is her name. She's the a novelist who won a Nobel Prize and Laureate Prize, I believe, for literature. She said that, like, the measure of a society is how we treat our most vulnerable, our most helpless. And if you look at, like, what the archaeologists have shown us about how early civilization came into existence, we know when society started, when we started seeing people with, like, I think it was a healed femur was the very first indication in archaeology that, oh, now a civilization exists here. There's a society that exists. And that was because in order for somebody to have a healed femur, there had to have been a culture of people that walked with them, that supported them when they couldn't walk, and that supported the weak person to a point until they were able to either fend for themselves or, continue on. And we're not doing that as a society right now. We are failing. We are failing miserably. And that goes for pro-life and pro-choice people, because I don't see a whole lot of people wearing masks. I don't see a lot of people getting their updates on the COVID vaccine. And people are still dying. Like, this has not just gone away. We have a big wave right now in July of August 2024, and there's still, again, like, thousands of people are still dying and still being affected. Long COVID is very, very serious. We already know from all the studies that it damages the brain, it damages the cardiovascular system, it probably sets people up for lack of immune down the road. Like, it does all kinds of really, really terrible things. And there's, like, countless studies out there. The scientists have already spoken, but we're turning our backs as a society and just letting immunocompromised people just die. You know, they go to the hospital and staff won't put on a mask for them. And whether you're pro-choice and you believe in bodily autonomy, well, these are people who don't want to die. What happens to their autonomy? What happens to the choice of somebody who doesn't want to be sick? That choice is taken away. And if you're pro-life, then all the more so. You value vulnerable lives, and unborn lives are valuable, but so are the lives of disabled people. We can't just turn our backs on people because it's not convenient. If you're going to ask someone to carry through an unplanned pregnancy at inconvenience to them, then be willing to be inconvenienced yourself in order to protect and save lives. It goes both ways. So yeah, I've been very disappointed with both my pro-life friends and my pro-choice friends, and it's made it kind of hard to really engage in the issue of abortion when I see so much lack of care about vulnerable lives in general. It's like I've given my life to this movement, and this is how they're treating me. Like,
Yeah, the thing is they never seem to realize just how ironic they were being. I remember on the very same day, one of my conservative friends posted a tweet by Donald Trump Jr. trying to call the left hypocritical on My Body, My Choice.
mhm.
And then one of my female feminist friends, I had no idea who this tweet was by, some kind of activist. He was trying to talk about how the right was hypocritical because they're saying my body, my choice on the vaccines, but they weren't on abortions. And I thought, they don't seem to realize that they're not actually pointing out the other side's hypocritical. They're just making them think you look hypocritical, and this isn't really going anywhere. They're just talking in circles.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like, both are saying my body, my choice on completely different subjects.
Yeah, and at some point, I think this again comes back to the giving charity to one another, to be able to disagree in a civilized manner, is that we have to realize that we have to find that common ground at some point, because we are a society, we all live together on this planet, and we can't just throw people out the window because they're inconvenient and because their needs are too high. If able-bodied people are perfectly fine and able to handle the air, that's great, that's wonderful, but that's not how we run a society. There's a reason why we have accessible parking, and why we have wheelchair ramps and elevators. It's because, yeah, great, you're able-bodied, you're able to climb up the stairs, that's super, but we don't just say, like, you do you to the person in the wheelchair and let them try to climb up the stairs by themselves at great expense and death to themselves. Yeah, there needs to be a conversation had in the general society of how do we protect vulnerable people, and that's got to come. I really do see that there's like a real connection here on the issue of abortion and the issue of disability rights, because in both cases the disabled often get cast aside. And I mean, this is not just on the issue of COVID, but also when it comes to unplanned pregnancies. Many times a diagnosis of a disability prenatally will end in that child being aborted. You look at, like, Down syndrome, for instance. Down syndrome children, 90% of them are aborted. In some countries it's even higher. I think Iceland is very close to 100. And these aren't people who are incompatible with life. Like, many people have health, like many of them will have health issues, perhaps heart issues, but they're happier than I am. They're probably happier than you are. Like, these are not people who can't live. And it's just disgusting to me that we have this trend of, like, diagnosing people prenatally and saying, oh, you're out of society, we're going to boot you out and dismembered and decapitated, and you're gone. These are valuable lives, and if to value the disabled postnatally, to me, is also to value them prenatally. So there's a lot of overlap for sure.
Yeah, but the vaccine thing was definitely annoying for me because that one seemed a little obvious, just to get the vaccine or just to wear a mask. Every time I talk to somebody who typically more on the political right that was against both those. I was under the impression that they had to really look for excuses not to do either. I back in 2020 I went on vacation to Universal Studios with one of my friends and his dad. I'm not friends with him anymore because he was a terrible person. I should not have wasted time with that. That's not important. But um at the time they had us, the masks were required even though we were outside, and before we got on the rides we had to take hand sanitizer every time. For me, I thought that was understandable. I wasn't upset about that. I mean, like, it was kind of annoying having to walk outside in Florida with a mask on, but
Mm.
it didn't like offend me or anything. It was totally understandable. But
Yeah.
and there was like a smoking area where you can go to smoke and take off your mask, and
Mm.
as long as you're a safe distance from other people, if you're already in a group, you can just stay together. But yeah, he wanted to go there. I don't think he wanted to smoke. I think he just wanted an excuse to not wear a mask. So we went with him, and his dad just started complaining about how stupid the masks are because there was a study done. I think he said it was in the Netherlands, maybe. I
Mm.
forgot where, that showed that masks are ineffective from preventing COVID. And
Ugh. Ugh.
I,
Okay. Yeah.
I did I had no idea what he was talking about, so I immediately Googled it. This study he was quoting, they weren't looking at social distancing.
Yeah.
It was just looking at masks. You have to do both. They tell you to do both for a reason. I remember
Yes.
this one study that's like if you're standing 3 feet apart but you're wearing a mask, you can still get COVID from somebody else.
Mm. Yeah.
That's why they tell you to stay 6 feet. Yeah.
It's airborne. It's like cigarette smoke. It really is. It's funny that the smoking area was where they weren't masking because they're kind of the same. But no, that study is just one of the examples of like how misinformation can just dominate a conversation, and unfortunately, it clouds a real conversation from happening. When it came to that study, what they actually found is that the mask mandates were not effective. And I mean, I don't know if we're quoting the same study. I know there might be more than one, but the one that I looked at, they said the mandates weren't effective as a way of like reducing spread in the population. And that's because, I mean, first of all, people weren't wearing them. And if they were wearing them, they weren't wearing them consistently. If you go back to look on online, one of my like weird hobbies is like I like to look at like um, cop cams, I guess they're called, body cams, where they like when they arrest criminals and whatnot. And it's just kind of fun to like watch them go through the process of arresting people. But when I watch those and I look at the footage from like 2020, 2021, 2022, it's like that even when there were mask mandates in place, people were wearing them on their chin, they're wearing them hanging off their ears. At one point, the guy's like the police officer tells the guy like, no, you can take off your mask, it's fine. Like, so yeah, of course we're not going to get rid of COVID in a society if nobody's properly wearing them. Second of all, there's a lot of people who were wearing really crappy masks, especially at the start of the pandemic. And, I was guilty of that too until I found out more information. But we were all wearing cloth masks. And, cloth does not do anything. I mean, it might protect you from a little bit of particulate matter, but, it's maybe like 10% that's going to be prevented from going out into the general air. So it's like smoke. If you're smoking from behind a cloth mask, it's going to come out. It's especially people were making them out of t-shirts, or they were really loose, and the sides were all open. Even surgical masks, they only prevent, I think it's 60% of particulate matter from spreading. And we have never had at any point since COVID started a time in which everybody was just wearing fit tested N95 masks. And I say fit tested because the material itself isn't really what matters when it comes to N95s. It's like, are there any holes? Like if you've got a leak around your nose and the air is just coming right out, that's not going to be as effective as if you've had it totally sealed. And one of my friends, his YouTube channel is called Fit Test the Planet, I think, or Fit Test My Planet, and he has all kinds of videos on there showing you how to fit test a mask, and you do a user test, or you can buy Bitrex and you can spray it in like a hood, and if you smell it through the mask, then you know it's not properly working. You know, you want to do like proper tests with like jaw exercises and the stuff you'd be normally be doing with a mask on. You know, are you smiling? Are you, you know, the stuff that you might do normally, and they'll all mess up with the fit of a mask. So no, like people who are like masks don't work. It's like, is that true, or is it like the fact that masks have never properly been done? And you know, we know masks work. I mean, asbestos workers wear masks. People, doctors to a point wear masks. The idea that masks don't work is just it's one of these mistruths that just kind of flies around the planet, gets repeated a million times, and then people just believe it.
Yeah, I remember there was one I saw in Sweden where people were just wearing the masks and they just felt like they could just do whatever they want because they're wearing the mask. They're 100% safe. So they were like standing in a crowded bus, for example, all masked and acting like it was completely fine. They can carry on their day. I mean, that's just a problem people have. You know, they're not listening to the whole guidelines. They're not social distancing and masking up.
Mhm.
But they tell you to do both for a reason, you know, especially since the vaccines weren't out yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, how was COVID like for you when it first hit your area? Because I remember some
Mhm.
like kind of depressing situations because I couldn't go to a bookstore or a library and I really wanted
Mhm.
to.
Yeah.
And I was stuck at home with my family and I hated that. But
Yeah, it it's actually kind of funny. When it first started, I was really close to the epicenter because the very first person in my city who was like kind of patient zero for my city, he was a coworker of my Polish dance partner. Like the we have like a Polish dance troupe that sadly never got to perform because of COVID. So, but yeah, so I was quite nervous when it first hit because I was like, you know, if my the dance teacher for the troupe, if he becomes sick, then like we were all in contact with him and how does this work? And so was, when it was new at the beginning, it was just like I had no idea what to expect. But thankfully, my friend did not get sick, and it was the first edition of COVID, so it wasn't as contagious as the later versions became. But yeah, it was definitely something that I've had to grow and learn over the months. When I first started, I was wearing a cloth mask. I was doing the bubbles, you know, that everybody was like, you know, oh, it's okay. I only have like 10 people in my contacts. You know, so I had a friend who I would hop in the car with him and take the kids to the marina. We would go boating, and you know, I'd spent a week at his house watching all the Marvel movies because I'm that kind of geek. And you know, so yeah, like this was 2020 up until like August, September, and then I started reading about how COVID damages the brain, and I was like, okay, all right, we need to look at this a little more seriously. And yeah, I definitely shut down my contacts at that point and started being a lot more selective. And then by 2021, I was just like, nope, we're done. We're just going to do video calls, and when I do have to go out, it's, you know, I'm fully masked, and that's just to go down and get the trash at the bins. So
yeah, I remember some people just took it extremely seriously. I remember one time I was at Target and I had to go to the bathroom. And after I washed my hands, I somebody was coming in, and then I sneezed because I had like allergy issues. And the guy he clearly heard me sneezing, so he kind of like just stood there, like trying to avoid me, like I had the plague.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was just kind of funny, you know, how seriously this guy was taking it. I remember somebody else, they like kicked open a door instead of like pushing the handle.
Sorry, I'm laughing because I used to do that even before COVID. It's like
It
if you
was just,
don't have to handle the door, so much the better. But but no, I mean, to get back to the thing of bodily autonomy, like I I generally think that that's a really good thing to have. Like I would not want to mandate people to wear a mask if it was just for their own sake. Like I don't think like I don't eat junk food, but I wouldn't have a mandate to make it illegal for people to eat junk food. You know, I wouldn't want to ban people from smoking. If they want to smoke, it's their body, their choice, that's fine. Where I draw the line is when it starts to invade someone else's body. So if somebody wants to smoke, that's great. If they want to smoke in my face, not great. That's your rights to your body and when they infiltrate on someone else's body. And likewise with the mask mandate, I wouldn't tell anybody what to wear. If you want to wear a skirt, that's fine. If you want to go and wear socks and sandals in the winter, that's fine. I wouldn't tell you to wear a mask just to protect yourself. I think it's a great idea because you don't want to get long COVID, but I think the mandates were right when they were in place because it's also about protecting other people. And that's where again bringing it back to abortion. Bodily autonomy is something that is important, but women who are pregnant are not autonomous in that moment, in the sense that there are two bodies present. It's kind of like with symbiotic twins, or conjoined twins rather, where one twin depends on the other in order to live and survive. If you had one of the twins who was the bigger and the stronger who said, okay, well, I want to be independent, I want my autonomy, and the only way to get that autonomy would be to slice off the other twin who is dependent on their heart, I think most people would say, well, hey, wait a second here, like the second twin, they also have rights. They also have like there are competing rights in this situation, but you can't just say, well, the one gets to make all the rights, all the choices at the expense of the other. And that's where it comes down to the question from me, which is, are the unborn human beings who have bodily rights, who have the right to have a say in what they, not a say that they can't, themselves speak, but whose rights should be taken into account. And we haven't gone too much yet into my arguments against abortion as an atheist and a humanist, but it boils down to basically four premises. The first being that the unborn are biologically human, and by that I mean like they're an embryo when it comes into existence is a part of our species. Before that you've got an ovum, you've got a sperm, those are biological parts of other people, but when they come together, there's a new being that comes into existence that is biologically different from its mother, biologically different from its father. And that's just a biological argument, a scientific argument, that's just like straight biology. Then the second is a philosophical argument, which is where we start talking about personhood and rights and who has rights. And I believe that there is no argument that can be made for the personhood or for denying personhood of the unborn that could also then not deny someone else's personhood. That all the reasons in society why we all have equal rights, even though we're all different sizes, we're different levels of intelligence, we're different levels of capabilities, different colors, different religions, different, you name it, we're all very different as human beings. And what makes us uniquely equal is the fact that we are all members of the same species. So I think that we have rights on a philosophical level because of what we have in common, which is number one, the biological argument. So the two of them work hand in hand. And then the third premise being that it is generally wrong to kill another human being. Self-defense would be one exception. And then therefore the conclusion is that it is generally wrong to have an abortion. And so coming to bodily autonomy, yes, women do have bodily autonomy and they do have bodily rights, but not at the expense of another human being. And a lot of people, this came up in my debate against Matt Dillahunty, and back then, like this was like 10 years ago, I wasn't quite as familiar with the bodily autonomy arguments, and I do regret that, and I wish I'd had more time to prepare and think about those arguments. But the arguments like Judith Jarvis Thompson, for instance, who argues that if you had a famous violinist and you woke up strapped to the violinist, you wouldn't be morally obligated to continue to care for that person. You could unhook yourself morally and let the violinist die, and therefore abortion, according to Judith Jarvis Thompson, is justified. The reason why that argument doesn't hold water is, first of all, it's not really analogous to abortion, because in the case of abortion, you're not just unhooking and letting die, you are actively involved in killing. So it would be kind of similar to, like, stabbing the violinist to death rather than just letting them die from the disease that they already have. Second of all, it's not really analogous to abortion because in that case, a violinist will die from the condition that was already killing them, whereas the fetus is currently alive and would continue to live if that process was not interrupted by someone actively ending their life. And when it comes to pregnancy, I believe it can be argued that parents have a moral obligation to fulfill the basic needs for their children, the children that they've brought into existence. So a pregnant person owes their child the very same thing that a parent of a born child would owe their children, which is food, shelter, protection from harm. And unfortunately, when it comes to pregnancy, there is no way to provide those basic things to a fetus that is too young to live anywhere else. And to provide them food and sustenance so that they can keep growing and getting older, and and shelter, there's no way to do that. There is no other place that a fetus can live. And that doesn't mean that therefore you're justified in, like, ending their life, because that would be the same as saying, like, well, this newborn can't live without me, so boop, out you go, I'm going to stab you to death. And that's where the third element comes in, that parents have a basic obligation to provide protection from harm. And abortion, given that it dismembers, decapitates, disembowels a fetus, or in the case of a medical abortion, suffocates them and prevents them from being able to get nutrients from the uterus, from the lining of the uterus, that's a very least to harm. So in a nutshell, I would say that's my argument for why I oppose abortion, and why I think we have a moral obligation as a society to support people who are pregnant and to do better than what we're doing right now.
I do think the pro-life movement would benefit more if they put more focus on what resources women could have when it comes to raising their children. And like I mentioned earlier, an increase in teaching responsibility and an increase in giving women birth control and education rights, for example.
Mhm.
Well, men too, of course. Like men also need access to condoms and other kinds of contraceptions.
Yep. Yeah, and like I was saying earlier, I think there is so much common ground that is not being explored right now in society, because people have been too busy fighting with each other and too busy calling each other names and saying, you hate babies, you hate women. It's like, if we really, like, I don't know of a single person who wouldn't like to be able to reduce the number of unplanned pregnancies. Like, and we may come to different conclusions on how we get to that point. I mean, my Catholic friends would tell you that, like, they want you to, like, wait till you're married and practice natural family planning and all that. But at the end of the day, we can still, I think they're wrong. My Catholic friends, sorry to, any of them who might be listening afterwards. But, at the end of the day, if we have fewer people getting pregnant, we're going to get closer to the goal that we all ultimately want, which is more freedom, more options for people to not have to be in a situation where an unplanned pregnancy upends their life.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time thinking about another thing to bring up.
That's totally fine. I mean, I could just sit here and monologue if you want.
Yeah, you can go ahead. Might have to cut that part out, but
No, it's fine. No, they don't mind seeing you as a human being. It's all good.
yeah, I mean, the only other person I've spoken publicly on abortions was Ben Bayer from the Ayn Rand Institute. He's a
Mm,
philosopher. He wrote the one book why the right to abortion is sacrosanct.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if you watched that one,
I
but
started watching it today. I wish I'd had more time to actually watch it because that might have been fun to like maybe engage with some of the arguments. So if at some point, if you want to have us both back at the same time, that might be kind of fun to have a little bit of a mini debate. But
I'd be
when I've had a
shocked if
chance to go through it.
I'd be shocked if he actually comes back. There's so many issues during that conversation. Like I started
Mm,
recording too early. I
mm,
had to like cut that part out, and then I didn't have Zoom Pro at the time, so he had to like I had to like end the call and then restart it because he had Pro. Then he just recorded for me,
yep.
and at some point my computer died on him while he was talking,
Mm,
so I had to plug it in. Yeah, no, a lot of issues going on
yep.
with that one. I
Yep.
felt so bad because
Mm.
I wasn't paying him for this.
Oh. No, if yeah, it'd be a lot of fun. And I also, having been on the receiving end of that, I think it wouldn't really be fun for him if I were to critique his arguments without him being there to respond back to me. So it's maybe just as well that I didn't have the chance to look at that one yet because I think it'd be more fun to have an actual discussion.
Yeah, he mostly argues it from the philosophical perspective, which is, always concerning as a philosopher.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
he he actually he actually argues that abortion should be allowed up to the moment a woman gives birth.
Oh wow.
He does have like his whole philosophical argument about that, like when do human rights really begin? And he argues that it should begin when like they're actually a born human being.
Mhm.
And I kind of get that, but I'm not in full agreement with that because I do think abortion should be legalized. I'm not a pro-lifer. I haven't, to be fair, I haven't read many pro-life arguments. I don't know many pro-life books. I did try to get into it a little bit and made a list, but I never got to reading them. But I haven't. I'm not convinced that life begins as a conception. I think up to the second trimester, I don't think it's really immoral or that big of a deal if a woman gets an abortion. But third trimester, it's clearly alive, in my
Mhm.
opinion. Some women have given birth prematurely up to 6 months in pregnancy, and the baby's still alive. It still grew naturally. To me,
Mhm.
that's clearly a human life.
Mhm.
If it has brain waves, if it has a heartbeat, and if you have to stop both those things, then yeah, that's basically killing.
Yep. Um, yeah, well, thank you for that because you've given me like 20 different things to answer to in one sentence. Yeah, just to quickly answer that your last statement, the the brain waves, um, they actually are detectable as early as 6 weeks, and the heart is
Really.
beating, or at least it's an electrical impulse, which really that kind of is what a heartbeat is, as early as like 21 days. So in that regard, when you say like you're stopping a brain or you're ending a brain and you're stopping a heart, abortion pretty much does that even in the first trimester.
Really, because I remember there was a study that said after the second trimester, they don't even feel pain.
Yeah, that's not true, and I mean, there is definitely some speculation on that, but there have been also other studies that have shown that I think it's the cortex that people claim is necessary to feel pain. And there is actually some evidence that they can feel pain in the first trimester because there is the elements, the sensory capabilities are there. And in fact, there's some evidence they may actually feel pain more in the early stages because the ability to turn off pain that all of us have at some point where you can kind of numb yourself to pain and go pain blind doesn't exist in the first trimester. So, but that to me is not really relevant to the abortion issue because even if they don't feel any pain, I can't slit your throat in your sleep if you're under anesthesia. The fact that you can't feel pain doesn't really factor into whether or not it's okay for me to end your life.
Well, my fan, it's not really the same thing because you actually have to be put on anesthesia. That's not something you're just naturally doing.
Hmm. But just to say, like, there's other people who can't feel pain. For instance, Gabi Jenga, who's a young girl who has a congenital ability, a congenital disability that prevents her from being able to have any kind of sensations in her nerves. And she has actually like scratched her eye and has to wear goggles now because she's not able to know when she's hurting herself. And she'll show up with like big massive wounds and like have no sensation that she was hurting herself. So someone like that who can't feel pain, it still wouldn't be okay for us to end her life just because she couldn't feel it.
She also has a consciousness, but that's something entirely different.
Yeah, I mean consciousness, like if you mean by that self-awareness, newborns don't have self-awareness. Newborns don't have that sense of self, that ability to recognize themselves as a continuing self from the beginning of their life and onwards. So that would disqualify newborns from having personhood. So like I said earlier, that like when it comes to personhood, there really is no argument that I can see that would justify denying personhood to the unborn that would not also then disqualify some born people.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it's a bit different with the newborn because they actually are mentally or physically developed. They just have to learn.
Mhm.
But with when it comes to fetuses, what you said about them already having brain waves and heartbeats at the first trimester, I haven't heard of that. I need to look into that. Because that's true, that seems like it could be a game changer. Because I did have to take a child psychology class last semester, and we had to talk a little bit about epigenetics and how what a woman is listening to while she's pregnant could actually have an effect on the
Mhm.
uh, the baby as it's developing.
Yep. Yep.
I thought to myself, that's actually really interesting because if what she's doing right now or what she's feeling right now and what she's listening to right now could affect it when it's actually a fully grown human or a baby.
Yeah.
I thought it
Yeah.
makes me wonder like how's it learning that early, maybe there's some kind of argument about when life begins, but it sounds like a whole that whole sounds like a whole even more complicated topic.
Yeah, there was an interesting study done on children whose mothers went through the Second World War, and how most of these, or a lot of these children later on in life developed eating disorders and like struggles with obesity and that kind of stuff because they had grown up with mothers who didn't have enough, and so there was scarcity while they were developing in the uterus, and that imprinted itself in a way that it impacted them, their psychology when they were older. So yeah, that you're absolutely right. Like the womb is not some kind of like alternate universe. Like it's not like a TARDIS that exists in some other dimension. It's they are here. They are here. They're active with us. And when we talk about brainwaves, like yes, for sure they're rudimentary brainwaves. Like they're not doing calculus in the uterus or anything. But as far as like a newborn being developed and a fetus not being developed, I mean that's just a progression of development. When it really comes down to it, we are not fully developed until we're like roughly the age of 25, because human development is a progression. We start out very, very small, we start out very weak, we start out with very few skills. And if you studied like psychology, you remember like we're encephalocaudal was the term. Like we start from the head to the feet, and then you start walking when you're older, inside out, and you get fine motor as you get older. We're constantly developing, but a teenager is not more valuable than a 5-year-old because they can reproduce, and an adult who has finished reproducing isn't more valuable or more worthy of life than a toddler who hasn't yet learned how to count. We are all equally human. We are all equally valuable. Do we have different skills? Absolutely. Do we have different rights based on the different levels of development that we have? Yeah, I'm not going to let my friend's 3-year-old drive a car. But that's a whole different question from saying, you can only have these rights once you've achieved this developmental level, to saying, we're going to end your existence and prevent you from ever having any of these rights in the future.
Okay, so we've spoken for about an hour. Do you want to keep going? Maybe go
I'm
for
I'm I'm
two.
good. If you have more questions, or like I'm just getting going. So I'm glad that we're finally able to get into the meat of the discussion and the arguments for and against abortion.
Because I do remember watching the Matt. I think we can go on for a few more minutes, but I do
Mhm.
remember watching the Matt Dillahunty debate
Mhm.
a while ago, so I don't really remember that perfectly.
It's
But
okay now.
what it kind of just seemed like he was just asking you a bunch of questions on what should we do about this, what should we do about that, what happens, what about rape and incest, what should we do about women who have abortions, and you did seem to have an answer for pretty much each question he asked, like just rapid fire an answer as quickly as he asked. But I think it was PZ Myers who came up at the end. I
Mhm.
hate PZ Myers, but that's not important.
Are you going to remove that from the podcast, or is that on the record?
No, no, I work with Atheists for Liberty. He already hates us, so
Okay. So
I
he's
can
not
say that.
likely to be listening to this conversation then.
I would be surprised. He came up because I think that you guys were doing a Q&A at the end,
Yep.
if I remember, and
Mhm.
I think he asked you, I think he asked you like, if you've what evidence was there that life begins conception because he's been studying this and he hasn't found anything.
Yep.
I think
Yep.
that's what he asked.
Mhm. Yes, I very much remember that discussion. In fact, I remember the subsequent ones that we've also had through his blog and whatnot. In fact, I think I had written up a large rebuttal that for some reason didn't get to the blog, so maybe someday I'll have to revisit that. But the big issue with PZ Meyer's argument is that he actually at many points conflates the argument that I'm making, and he thinks that I'm making a personhood argument when I'm making a biological argument. And I know that because he said that at one point in history, his family, who is Jewish, would not have been considered human. So the issue with that, though, is that that was personhood human. There are two different ways of defining human, and oftentimes people think that we're making the argument that we're saying personhood, which is value, which is, do you have rights, do you have dignity, do you have a worth in society? And in the Holocaust, yes, of course, Jewish people were not considered to have those things. They didn't have value, they didn't have rights. But biologically, they were still the exact same species that you and I are, and they still had the biological humanity. The what they physically were was human. They were of the human species. And when I'm arguing that human life begins at fertilization, I'm not saying that scientists have conferred humanhood or personhood to the fetus at that stage. That's a philosophical argument. When we talk about human rights, when we talk about value, when we talk about shoulds and shouldn'ts, should you not kill someone? Should they have the right to live? That's all personhood. I mean, sorry, that's all philosophy. Anytime you're making any kind of ethical claim, that's philosophy. When I'm saying life begins at fertilization, all I'm saying is that biologically speaking, this embryo is of our species. There is nothing that will be added physically to its substance other than the same thing that is added physically to the substance of an infant or a toddler or a teenager, which is time to mature and to grow into the kind of being that they already are from fertilization.
This actually kind of reminds me of one time when I was in college, and I did make a. I was talking to some people I knew. It was three women, and I forgot what we were talking about, but I remember making a joke about Texas, and one of the girls said something like, "No, I don't want to go to Texas. They have too many mosquitoes." And then I said, "And Republicans," and and so one of them brought up the abortion bans they have there, and one of the girls said, "Yeah, it's my body, my choice." And then I said, "That's kind of debatable." And then this other girl, God, I hate her. Nobody's friends with her anymore. Thank God. She
Poor
legit
girl.
got mad at me and immediately compared to what I said to treating women like cattle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's again, that goes back to what I said at the beginning about being charitable to your opponents or the people that disagree with you. You know, people really don't have horns. Like we're not, there's nobody who is a devil. I mean, maybe there are, there's a whole lot of sociopaths and psychopaths out there. I'm not saying that like there is nobody in the movement who doesn't hate women. There's nobody up there who wouldn't want to kill us all. Those people exist, but I'd say for the vast majority of people, we are good people on both sides of this issue. We're people who genuinely care for human beings. And if you're pro choice, I don't think you're an evil person if you've had an abortion. I don't think you're a monster if you support a woman's right to abortion. I think we disagree because we disagree on the fundamentals, and sometimes we disagree because we're not hearing each other, because we're talking past each other, or because we're using different definitions. And so one thinks that they're saying one thing, the other thinks that we're saying the other. So we're kind of just, crossing and not really connecting. But, at its core, I think the vast majority of people who are against abortion genuinely do believe that a fetus is a human being worthy of protection. Does that mean that they're going to get it right in every other issue? Heck no. I think most of my pro-life conservative friends are full of crap on many other issues. I still love them. I still respect them. I think they're wrong on their attitudes towards sex. I think they're wrong on a lot of, like I said, the way that they're treating disabled people in the pandemic. And likewise, when it comes to my pro-choice friends, I think there's a lot of things that people just aren't, we're not getting it. We're not connecting with each other. And since most of us are good people, we should be able to do better. We should be able to find that common ground and work together without demonizing each other. Without calling each other baby killer and woman hater, and oh, you just want to have like women be like cattle. Like, that's not necessary. Like, can we not just work together to address poverty? Can we not just work together to make sure that there is state-funded daycare, to make sure that there is maternity leave, that your job is protected if you have to go on maternity leave, that you have protection for your job if you're not able to do this particular job, that you can be temporarily transferred to something else that would be safer, or an office job, and then come back to your job later. Can we not make sure that we have daycare on university campuses in high school? Can we not fund these things? Can we not work together and find that common ground, or have more options for working from home? I mean, gosh, like our governments, both in Canada and in the States, forced people to go back to work at the start of the pandemic, or sorry, at the start of, was it 2022 or 2020? I can't even remember which year now. It's all a big, massive blur. But people who were working from home just fine were suddenly told they had to go back to work, especially in Washington, D.C., because they were worried about the restaurants going out of business or some
Oh
nonsense like that.
yeah.
We've got so many things that we can do now with technology. Give students the option of doing school from home. That option that was there for a brief time during the start of the pandemic. Give people the option to work from home. There's just, like I said, man, this
Oh yeah.
world does not have to be the crap hole that it is. We can do so much better if we just stop hating each other and blocking each other and treating each other like we're all evil if you don't agree. We agree on just enough things that we can make the world better if we actually were to bother to try.
Oh yeah, speaking of that, I did hate doing school from home. That was horrible for me.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I had to drop out and go back to work because I was not gonna pass those online classes. But yeah, I'm back in school now. I'm almost done.
See, for me, it was the opposite because I have a disability that was already hindered by going in person, and I loved having the option to have university come to me. Like I can roll out of bed with almost no sleep, show up in a class, sit through it, and then roll back to sleep. Like it was options that you wouldn't be able to do if you had to take a bus downtown for an hour and a half and there was no going back home in between classes. So yeah, for me, I thrived online, and I wish unfortunately the university that I'm a part of has minimized the courses that remain online. There's not a whole lot of options, but you know, just to say, like, these options can exist. They would help people who are pregnant. They would help people who are disabled. There's no reason why we can't make the world more accessible. And until the world is as accessible as it needs to be, at least making it available online so that it's at least inclusive to people who right now are being locked out of society.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the Roe v. Wade or the Roe v. Wade situation, or the people who are actively trying to ban abortions, I never really thought that was an attack on feminism or an attack on women's rights, to be honest. Because I did think overturning Roe v. Wade was a terrible idea. I even briefly discussed it with one of my conservative friends because he asked me what I thought of it, and I told him I thought it was a dumb idea. But well, all it did was just move the abortion laws to the states,
Mm,
and the people who are trying to actively decrease them, we already talked about this. They're not trying to
yeah.
take away rights from women, but that always seems to be like a go-to accusation, because it did kind of bother me, and I'd always had to defend it from that, but some people really got aggressive with me when I would say something like that.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing is that, like, feminism does not have to be like a cookie cutter one size fits all either. There's room for a lot of people and a lot of views under the umbrella of feminism. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of people who are feminists within the pro-life movement. In fact, there's one of my favorite organizations called New Wave Feminist, and the woman who runs that, she's such a firecracker. I love her. But the early feminists, many of them were also against abortion. Now, it might have been for different reasons because abortion would have been a lot more dangerous back then, but many of them also really felt that abortion was evidence that society had failed women. And they, I believe it was Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Let me see if I can just pull that up really quickly for you. Um, yeah, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, she was the author of the feminist newspaper, The Revolution. And on February 5th in 1868, she wrote an article that decried the murder of children either before or after birth. And she argued that the remedy to the killing of the children before or after birth is the complete and elevation and enfranchisement of women. And then Victoria Clavin Woodhull, who was America's first female presidential candidate, she also said something similar to that, which was that the remedy is in granting freedom and equality to women. So to these early feminists, abortion wasn't viewed as this thing that is needed in order to give women equality. It was equality and the elevation of women that was viewed as a solution to abortion. Abortion itself being evidence that we have not done everything that we needed to do to elevate women. If you're in, like I said earlier, if you're in the situation where you are going to be limited and knocked out of society by a pregnancy because you don't have the right support, because you can't continue your career or your education because of a pregnancy, then that's a really big sign that we've left this gaping trap, as I was mentioning earlier, for people to just continue to fall into. And abortion acts as a band-aid to kind of cover up the trap, but the trap is still there. We haven't fixed it. We haven't really dealt with it. And there's going to be countless women who will come after the woman having an abortion who are going to be in the exact same situation. And I think it's a feminist duty to take care of other women and people who are getting pregnant, to make sure that they have the options to not be hindered by pregnancy, and abortion isn't the only way that that can be done. And I would argue that there, not only do we have the moral obligation to protect the unborn children, if you're pro-life, but we also have the obligation to protect women and make sure that we have these options.
I may have run out of things to talk about, but I think this might be a decent time to end it. I couldn't do this last time because my computer glitched out, but I'd like to ask people just random questions that
Okay,
have nothing to do with what we were talking about,
I
just for
love
the
it.
sake of asking.
All right,
So, first question,
like an
who's your
icebreaker, but at the end.
yeah, just for fun, just out of curiosity.
All
So,
right.
first question, who's your favorite U.S. president?
Oh wow, that is a good question. See, I'm Canadian, so I
Uh,
think it would probably be. Is it Teddy Roosevelt? Is he the one who installed a lot of programs to help the poor?
Um, I'm not
The,
good
the
at
one who was
history.
in the wheelchair?
The one that had polio?
Hmm?
I think that was the one that had polio. I think that was
Yeah,
FDR.
yeah, yeah. Am I thinking the
FDR,
right person?
Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
That's the one. Okay, so
Yeah,
I'm
the
not
four
misremembering.
term.
Yay! I win my trivia question for the night.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
only
I would pick him because I think I like a lot of the quotes that he had when I visited the memorial in Washington D.C. I was like, ooh yeah, like that. And yeah, I think he had the right idea of addressing poverty and starting there. And I wish that we had continued that. I think he was the one who kind of got welfare rolling and things. And sadly, there hasn't been any movement to keep up with that to make sure that we actually meet inflation with an equal amount to be given in welfare and disability supports. And that's an issue in Canada and in the States. So yeah, he's my favorite president. Sorry,
maybe
I brought it back to what we were talking about accidentally. I'm sorry.
that's okay, but I don't really know much about U.S. presidents, unfortunately. I do plan on reading a biography on each and every last one of them, just so I can know what the fuck what happened. But with him, I only know him for a few things. I know him because he had polio, and I know he
Yep.
served 4 terms, the only one to do that. Uh, I know he was involved in World War II, because he was the president during World War II. But I also know him because I got really into H.L. Mencken, and Mencken was a huge critic of FDR, and they actually had some personal hatred with each other
Oh,
because Mencken ended up he attended this convention where Roosevelt was present, and he did his whole speech, which was meant to like criticize Roosevelt's policies.
mhm,
And Roosevelt said after he was done with the speech, Roosevelt said to him, "Well played," and it was time for Roosevelt to give a speech, and he actually just completely criticized the newspaper business, which Mencken was a part of, criticized Mencken, and just really embarrassed him in front of all those people, and Mencken was just really mad about it, and he said to one of his contemporaries, "I'm gonna get that bastard." So a bit of a personal hatred. So because of my biases, I also hate Roosevelt. I mean, I don't really, but
oh,
I'm inclined to think maybe I should be critical of the New Deal, even
hmm.
though I have no idea what that is. I don't
I
know.
mean, I'm sure he's not perfect. I just really liked the welfare approach, and like I said, I'm Canadian, so my knowledge of American presidents is not going to be as solid as yours or as someone who grew up in the States.
You'd be surprised by the U.S. education system. We really don't know much about the presidents, or at least I didn't, where I went to high school.
Fair enough, fair enough. I mean, that's a whole other sub issue that we could talk about because, yeah, there's a lot of issues with the educational system, but that can be another hour, so we won't do that.
I mean, we could try
All right.
maybe
So
later, but
what's your next question?
uh, this might be a little harder. Who's your favorite founding father?
Okay, who do I have to choose from again? I think
Well, we have a ton, but
you know what? I think wait, I know. Benjamin Franklin. He was one of the founding fathers, right? He wasn't
yeah,
officially on the. He was never a president, but I believe he was considered one of the founding fathers. Correct?
yeah, he was an inventor.
Yeah. I like him.
So
I like that he was inventor. The whole thing with the kite and the key that was really cool. And also, I believe he was the one who opened the very first post office in the States, if I remember correctly. That was quite a while ago that I was in Philadelphia, but I remember learning about that then. It's like, that's cool.
Yeah, that sounds right. I
Mhm.
remember I just watched one documentary about him a few years ago.
Mhm.
I did also get into it when I was a little kid, but it was him and Abraham Lincoln that I loved as a child.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I got into Lincoln again when I was a teenager because I found out he may have been an atheist in his youth. And I was really into atheist activism.
Lincoln is cool too. I saw the when I was in DC, I got to visit the theater where he was shot and the house where he died, and the massive, I don't know if you've ever been there, but in the Lincoln Museum, there's a gigantic spiral staircase that goes like several floors, and it's completely surrounded by books that have been written about Lincoln. So if ever you wanted to read like every book that's ever been written about Lincoln, good luck with that. 'Cause, yeah, I was blown away. I've never seen such a massive pile of books in my entire life. It's worth looking up if you've never been there.
I'll try and read all of them. I know his friend William Herndon, I think, went to law school with him. He wrote a handful of biographies
Mm.
on Lincoln. He was I want to say he was the one that popularized the idea that Lincoln was an atheist in his youth. I do
Mm.
remember one anecdote he shared where he asked Lincoln to review his speech, and Lincoln told him to remove the word God, and Herndon asked him why, and Lincoln said, "I'm certain that no such personality ever existed."
Oh yeah, I have heard that. Yeah.
Well, that's an anecdote he shared, so like we can't 100% confirm that, but
Yeah.
he also had like other friends and other people
Yeah.
who've seen him in his youth, like how he carried a Bible around just to
Mm.
make fun of it, how he debated preachers,
Yeah.
how he had this whole pamphlet criticizing religion that his friends burned because they knew it was going to hurt his career in the long run.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that there may be a lot more atheism out there amongst the people of old than we ever really fully knew. But it's an interesting study for sure.
I can certainly say he didn't die an atheist, which
Mm.
unfortunate, but he referred to God way too many times
Yeah.
to be a secular person in his later
Yeah,
years.
but then again, he was president, and we have definitely seen that, including in recent cases where people have claimed to be Christians and hold their Bible upside down. You know, maybe a lot of people who become president feel they have to pander to people. So, you know, who really knows?
Well, his wife did say she believed he was a religious person, but not a technical Christian. Although I don't care what his wife says because she was kind of a nut job.
Mm. Yeah.
All right, next question. What's your favorite book?
I'd like to quote. Sorry, I've got to get out there. I'd like to quote the movie Ever After, in which the character of Drew Barrymore, by the name of Danielle, she said, "I could no sooner choose a favorite book than I could choose a favorite star in the sky." Uh, yeah, that would be really hard to pinpoint a favorite book. Um, I mean, also too depends if we're talking fiction or nonfiction.
Just a book in general. I'll take
Hmm.
anything. I need to expand my list on both.
Yeah, I think if I had to just randomly pick one just off the top of my head, I would probably just pick the Eyes on the Prize book that was written by, I believe it was, I don't know, I might be mispronouncing his name, but Juan, it's like Juan Williams. Um, I really have a fascination with the civil rights era and just digging into the characters and the people who are often overlooked because it really takes like a whole slew of people to make a movement. People often just remember like the big names, you know, Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and that's it. Like they don't realize that there's like a lot of little people. And I say little because like they're not well known. And you know, if you didn't have you know, the the students who sat down at the lunch counter, and if you didn't have the other people who came before Rosa Parks who refuses to like give up their spaces, which were others, like Rosa was not the first one, if you didn't have like a whole bunch of people from Birmingham, the young students who said, you know, we're willing to go to jail and we're not going to give up on what we believe in, there wouldn't have been a civil rights movement. Like Martin Luther King Jr. marching by himself wouldn't have happened. Rosa Parks would have been thrown in jail. There would have been no Montgomery bus march or bus strike if people hadn't also decided to get behind her and refuse to take the bus. So yeah, I think if I just had to randomly pick a book, I would pick that one just because I get really inspired when I see what people have done in the past and how every person there's no little person really. There's nobody who's insignificant when it comes to making changes in the world. It really does take everybody.
Speaking of the civil rights era, that actually kind of remind me another name that people just don't really hear mentioned often is the journalist George Schuyler.
Mm,
And yeah, I thought he was a really interesting individual, especially considering, at the time, because he was he was a Black American, so he obviously faced a lot of prejudice and discrimination, and joined the U.S. Army because he thought that would people would start respecting him more often despite his race. But
yep.
even while he served, he was still getting mistreated and dealing with racism, and he got so fed up with it, he deserted it, and ended up getting jailed.
Mm,
And because of that, he had to start working like these minimum wage odd jobs until he eventually started uh, involving himself with these communist groups that were portraying themselves as these anti-racist movements or anti-racist ideologies. But he eventually learned what they were doing was that they were trying to just take advantage of Black people, just like
mm,
and promote communism. And he became critical of communism and racism as well, and became a conservative writer, like a self-identified conservative. Even wrote a book called Black and Conservative.
mm,
And I thought he was really interesting because he was actually very critical of the civil rights movement. He was even critical of Malcolm X. He was critical of Martin Luther King Jr.
mm,
And this is just my personal bias again, but he really stood out to me because even as a conservative,
mm,
during his later years, he was openly an atheist.
yep.
He was critical of Christianity,
Mm,
and you just don't really see that combination. Even nowadays, you don't see people who are conservative that are openly atheists. You don't see that many Black Americans that are openly
mm,
conservative or openly atheist, and he was both. So I
mm,
kind of joked he was this legendary super minority. He
yep. I I think it'll be interesting in a few years' time when the FBI releases the tapes of Martin Luther King Jr.'s supposed infidelity. That like FBI apparently have a whole lot of tapes that they're going to be releasing in another, I think it's 3 years from now. So I'm not overly worried that it's going to like what's going to happen to the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King Jr. if he becomes a non-hero to people, because I really think part of the problem with the civil rights movement is that people have put too much emphasis on Martin Luther King Jr. and on Rosa Parks, and like they were great people, don't get me wrong, but they were not the entirety of the movement. So if it's they were humans, and if we find out that Martin Luther King Jr. was like this horrible man, it's really not going to make the difference. The movement still was a great movement. Like, and if even if he hadn't been there, there would still great people who stood up for their rights and for the rights of others. There were allies. And whether it's in any movement, there needs to be allies. And I look at people like Viola Liuzzo, for instance, who was a Detroit mother, and she saw the violence in Montgomery, Alabama, and with Bloody Sunday when they were attacked on the bridge for trying to march from Montgomery um, to Birmingham, I believe it was. So yeah, and then she left her kids and ended up being murdered when she was down in Selma. So they were marching Selma to Montgomery. That's what it was. And anyways, every movement needs everyone, not just the big names. And there was no movement without everyone. And so, yeah, whatever happens in the future, I'm not overly worried. Anyway, did you have any other questions before we spend way too much time talking about the civil rights era? Because I could feel like I can do that for a while too.
I was just gonna ask one more. Are you writing any books at the moment or plan to?
Yes,
Oh,
yes, I
really?
do plan to. I don't know if I ever will because my ADHD really likes to take me down other trails all the time. But the intent has always been, in fact, when I was a little girl, I think I was 5 years old the first time somebody asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I said I wanted to be a writer. So I've got to fulfill that commitment that I made to myself 40 years ago and say, come on, we're gotta write these books now, make it happen.
Oh yeah. Is it gonna be nonfiction or are you gonna write like a novel or something?
I possibly might do both because I have written in both genres. Actually, my very first time that I wrote a quote novel, it was like a novella. I was 10 years old and I wrote this little book called The Mystery of the Missing Dogs, which largely emulates the mystery books of like Nancy Drew and Bobbsey Twins and that kind of stuff, but also incorporates the Sleepover Friends. I don't know if you've heard of that book series, but it was
I
basically
haven't.
just four friends that got together and solved a mystery. And so, who knows? Maybe I'll just put that one, publish that one again.
Oh, you could try. I mean, because like I
My
wanted
10-year-old self can finally be published.
when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a superhero. But
Yeah, there you go. But no, I
yeah,
definitely want to write a couple nonfiction books. One of them would probably be on the secular case against abortion and being an atheist and what that's been like being both the pro-life atheist in the atheist community and being a pro-life atheist in the pro-life community. Uh, Oddly enough, I feel like I sometimes got more reception and love from the pro-life community than I ever got from the atheist community, but that's a whole other discussion. But um, and I would also like to write a bit about the purity culture because I was unfortunately a victim of that, where I was like trained from a very young age to like wait until marriage, and it's something that I actually regret having waited as long as I did, and I feel like I would just like to share my memoir, my experience of doing that, and why I feel that the purity culture movement gets it wrong.
I
So yeah,
see.
that'd be it.
Oh yeah, so it's been about 90 minutes. I think this could be a good time to end it. Yeah, thanks for doing this. I'm not gonna pay you.
I wasn't expecting you to.
Okay, that's good. But yeah,
Although I appreciate you telling me at the end, it's like, wait, what? Too late.
but
No, it's been my pleasure. It's been a lot of fun, and thank you very much for having had me on your podcast. And I know that it's been a while since you first asked me, and I life just kind of was always getting in the way, and I was overwhelmed every time you asked. And so finally, you asked me again. I was like, yes, we are doing it. 2024, making it happen. And I'm very happy that I did. I'm very happy that you had me on your show, and I think we had a good conversation. So
yeah, I think this worked out pretty well. It seemed mostly naturally flowing. And that was
yeah,
the whole point of trying to start this, mostly just to help me improve my social skills. But I didn't want it to be anything too serious, like nothing
yeah,
professional, just something I'm doing for fun, just
nothing too
normal
serious. Talking
conversations.
about abortion.
Just normal conversations. I'm not gonna like write up an essay and try to debate you on this shit. Let's just see what you know.
Yeah. Well, you did a great job. You were a fine host, and I very much enjoyed myself. And to your listeners, if anybody wants to contact me, I will hopefully have the Pro Life Humanist website back up and running again. And my email address is Kristine, Kristine, at prolifehumanist.org. So it's prolifehumanist.org. And yes, I'm writing it in the air as I'm talking because I can't spell. Um, yeah, and I would just love to be able to connect with people if you have any questions. We only scratched the surface really on what could be addressed and could be said, including on bodily autonomy. There's obviously always more conversation to be had. And your other guest that you had last time, uh, who had talked about Anne Ryan's book, I'd love to have a chance to interact with him if that ever worked out too. So Thank you very much.
I could try emailing him. I'm not sure if he'd be interested, but I'll just throw that in there. But
That sounds great. And if not, this has been a lot of fun, and I hope to get to talk to you again.
just one recommendation maybe. I did go to Freedom Fest last month. I'm thinking when they have it next year, maybe you could try seeing if you can get pro-life humanists to have a booth there, or at least some kind of
Yeah.
presence to get more
Well,
people
I'm
in.
waiting for the sterilizing vaccines to come and make life
Uh,
accessible again. I wouldn't want to try flying with a mask, and I know people who've tried flying with like PAPRs, which are like they're like ventilators basically, and it's hit or miss as to whether you're successful in doing that. Especially coming from Canada, they will ask you to unmask at the border, and it's like, yeah, I think I'm gonna hang tight and do online things until it's safer. Hopefully things will
okay.
change in the next few years. There's some good vaccines that are currently being tested, so who knows? We'll see. I'd like this to not be the entirety of my life, but one day at a
Okay.
time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, sorry to
And
hear
yeah, for
that, but
everyone else out there, get your fit test masks and wear your N95s. Start saving lives. That's your takeaway message for the day to everyone.
I'm giving you
You can
thumbs
all
up
be
as well.
pro-life. Save lives. Please. Don't kill my friends. Well, thank you so much. And is it Rolling? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah,
Right. Well, thank you very much, Rolling. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to chatting with you in the future.
you too. Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too. Goodbye.
Bye.